Every era of cinema has its kings, the blockbusters that conquered the world, the legends that defined a generation. But sometimes, history is rewritten not by perfection, but by accident. Behind the explosions and billion-dollar franchises lies a quieter truth. Some of the most important action films ever made weren't supposed to matter. They were small, strange, risky, or dismissed altogether until time proved them immortal. A revenge story built from grief. A police raid filmed in a crumbling building. A low-budget experiment that redefined independence. 15 moments where chaos gave birth to revolution. These weren't corporate designs. They were improvisations created by directors with nothing left to lose, actors chasing redemption, and stuntmen who refused to fake it. Out of uncertainty came innovation. Out of failure came form. From John Wick's sleek, calculated violence to the raw ferocity of the raid, from Mad Max's wasteland grit to El Mariachi's backyard bravado, each one of these films changed the way we see motion, sound, and consequence. Not because they planned to, but because they had to. They say luck favors the prepared. But in cinema, sometimes it favors the desperate. These are the accidents that shaped action. The films that rewired cinema itself, one frame, one misstep, one miracle at a time. Let's descend into the stories behind 15 action films that accidentally changed the world of movies forever. 1. John Wick, 2014. No one expected a revolution to begin with a man and his dog. John Wick was never meant to change anything. It wasn't a franchise starter, it was a quiet gamble. Keanu Reeves, once the face of long-forgotten blockbusters, stepped into a simple revenge story about loss and fury. Two first-time directors, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, both stuntmen by trade, decided to approach it differently, not as a movie about killing, but about movement. They stripped away the shaky cameras and frantic editing that had infected Hollywood action. In their place came clarity, geometry, and rhythm. Gunplay wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Gun Fu was born, a cold, precise dance where every reload, every spin, every shot felt deliberate. Reeves trained for months, treating the role not like acting, but like ritual. He moved like a weapon controlled, tired, yet unstoppable. The story was simple, but the execution was art, and somehow, this small, stylized film turned into the new model for modern action. Every studio chased its silhouette. Every assassin on screen suddenly needed a code, a myth, a bullet ballet. What began as grief became gospel. John Wick didn't just reignite Keanu Reeves, it reinvented how action could feel. But where John Wick was sleek and calculated, the next revolution came from sweat, concrete, and fists that never stopped moving. 2. The Raid, 2011. Imagine making a masterpiece inside a single building. That's exactly what happened in 2011. When Welsh filmmaker Gareth Evans and a team of unknown Indonesian fighters crafted The Raid. The budget was tiny, the story smaller still, a SWAT team trapped in a high-rise controlled by criminals. But within those walls, they reinvented cinematic violence. Evans introduced the world to Pencak Silat, a martial art that looked less like performance and more like survival. The lead, Iko Uwais, moved with terrifying precision, fluid 1 second, explosive the next. The camera never looked away. You felt every crack, every gasp, every hit. There were no superstars, no slow motion, no CGI safety nets. Just real people fighting to exist on screen. The film's unfiltered energy shocked Western audiences who'd grown used to clean choreography and digital safety. Hollywood directors suddenly realized they'd been polishing the life out of their own fights. The Raid became a benchmark overnight, a film that redefined action not by scale, but by contact. It proved that you don't need space to make impact, just walls close enough to break and fighters desperate enough to survive. And while Evans captured chaos with a steady hand, another filmmaker in Mexico would create revolution with nothing but a camera and a dream. 3. El Mariachi, 1992. $7,000, one camera, a future director bleeding for every frame. Before Hollywood knew his name, Robert Rodriguez was just a kid from Texas with a script, a vision, and no money. El Mariachi was meant for the Spanish-language video market, cheap, quick, forgettable. But nothing about it turned out that way. Rodriguez did everything himself, writing, shooting, editing, even sound design. He recruited locals as actors, borrowed props from friends, and edited footage using 2 VCRs in his bedroom. What should have been amateurish turned into something electric. A film bursting with confidence, humor, and style. When Sony stumbled across it, they couldn't believe the numbers. $7,000 less than catering on a studio film had birthed a movie that felt alive. It wasn't polished, it didn't need to be. Its roughness was the point. El Mariachi inspired a generation of filmmakers who realized the impossible could be done. You didn't need permission, you just needed a story and the guts to shoot it. A film made from scarcity became a manifesto of independence. And from that lesson in survival, cinema's next great wasteland would emerge sunburnt, furious, and unstoppable. 4. Mad Max 1979. Before the wasteland became a genre, it was just a stretch of Australian asphalt and a dream that shouldn't have worked. In 1979, George Miller wasn't a director, he was a former doctor with stories from the emergency room still haunting him. He'd seen what metal and flesh looked like when they met at full speed. That experience became the heartbeat of Mad Max. With a micro-budget, a crew of amateurs, and Mel Gibson fresh out of obscurity, Miller filmed a broken world held together by gasoline and vengeance. The roads were real. The danger was real. The chaos wasn't simulated, it was survived. What came out of that madness wasn't a polished Hollywood fantasy, it was something raw, feral, and strangely poetic. Mad Max didn't just depict collapse, it created the visual language of it. The camera chased speed until it became emotion. Every crash an echo of inevitability. Audiences didn't know what to call it. They just knew it felt alive. The film made history as one of the most profitable independent movies ever and unknowingly launched the entire post-apocalyptic aesthetic that still fuels cinema decades later. Out of the dust, a myth was born. And the next revolution would come from a place with even less. No budget, no safety, and no shoes. 5. Ong Bak 2003. He didn't speak English. He didn't use wires. He didn't fake pain. In 2003, Ong Bak, Muay Thai warrior, erupted out of Thailand like a punch no one saw coming. Tony Jaa wasn't a household name. He was a stuntman obsessed with authenticity. His rule was simple. If the audience can't feel it, don't bother shooting it. Every stunt in Ong Bak was real. Flames, glass, steel, sweat, no CGI. No trickery. Jaa leapt through hoops of fire, dove over moving vehicles, and collided with concrete as if bones were negotiable. The camera never flinched. Director Prachya Pinkay filmed every impact like proof. What emerged wasn't just action, it was physical honesty. Jaa's body became the story, the bruises became the script, and through that, Ong Bak revived something Hollywood had forgotten. That danger, when real, carries soul. The film's ripple was global. Western filmmakers scrambled to imitate its intensity but couldn't replicate its purity. Because Ong Bak wasn't crafted for style, it was born from survival instinct. Tony Jaa didn't need words. His language was gravity, and he spoke it fluently. But where Jaa's power came from raw instinct, the next revolution was all about imperfection, a man who bled, limped, and still became the blueprint for modern heroes. 6. Die Hart 1988. Christmas lights, broken glass. One Man Alone. When Die Hard was released in 1988, it didn't look like a revolution. Bruce Willis wasn't an action star, he was a TV comedian wearing a smirk and a white tank top. The studio doubted him, the audience doubted him. But by the film's end, he'd rewritten the rules of what a hero could be. John McClane wasn't invincible, he was scared. He argued, panicked, bled, and laughed at his own misery. Every scrape made him more human and more compelling. In a world of muscle-bound demigods, he was painfully mortal. Director John McTiernan turned claustrophobia into art. The skyscraper became a vertical prison, every floor a new war zone. The pacing was relentless, the tension surgical. Even the now iconic fall of villain Hans Gruber carried real fear. Alan Rickman was dropped a second early to capture that genuine look of betrayal. Die Hard made vulnerability heroic. It shattered the idea that strength meant silence or size. Suddenly, action heroes could cry, curse, or question themselves and still win. The genre never recovered, it evolved, and as McClane limped barefoot through shards of glass, another fighter, halfway across the world, was about to carve his name into history with nothing but fists and philosophy. 7. Enter the Dragon 1973. He was already a legend, but this film made him eternal. In 1973, Enter the Dragon arrived like a storm that no one in Hollywood was prepared for. It wasn't supposed to make history, it was just an East meets West martial arts film, produced with hesitation and cultural skepticism. But Bruce Lee turned it into something transcendent. Lee wasn't performing, he was preaching. His philosophy, fluidity over form, mind over muscle, shaped every strike, every motion. He fought not to entertain, but to express an idea that martial arts was a language of truth. The fights were real in spirit, if not in danger. Wide shots, long takes, no edits to hide weakness. You saw the grace, the pain, the sweat. And then, before the world could celebrate it, Bruce Lee was gone dead at 32, days before the premiere. His absence made the film immortal. Enter the Dragon broke open the gates of Hollywood for Asian cinema, turning martial arts from a curiosity into a global phenomenon. It wasn't just action, it was enlightenment wrapped in fury. And while Lee taught the world that a punch could carry philosophy, the next revolution would replace wisdom with momentum heroes who didn't talk, only ran. 8. District B13, 2004. Speed, gravity, walls. Nothing stood still in District B13. When the French action film hit theaters in 2004, no one expected it to reshape movement itself. It wasn't about guns or glory, it was about agility. David Bell, the co-creator of parkour, didn't need wires or stuntmen. He used only what the world gave him: architecture, fear, and gravity. The story was minimal, a cop and a criminal forced to work together in a walled-off Paris district, but the visuals were electric. Every chase felt like rebellion, every leap an act of defiance. Director Pierre Morel shot action like it was survival. Long takes, real jumps, no safety nets. It was freedom captured frame by frame, Hollywood noticed. Within a few years, parkour was everywhere from Casino Royale to The Bourne Ultimatum, but none of them captured the same purity, the same desperation of flesh versus concrete. District B13 didn't just introduce a new style, it proved that speed could tell a story. And in doing so, it reminded the world that the human body, pushed to its limits, was still the most powerful special effect of all. The next film, though, would slow everything down and turn bloodshed into ballet. 9. Hard-Boiled, 1992. 2 guns, 1 heartbeat, endless chaos. When Hard-Boiled exploded out of Hong Kong in 1992, it wasn't just another cop thriller, it was pure cinematic opera. John Woo wasn't choreographing violence, he was composing it. The film followed a hardened cop and a tormented undercover agent locked in a moral crossfire. But plot was secondary. The real story unfolded through motion bullets flying like raindrops, doves fluttering through smoke, every gunfight playing like a dance of death. The famous hospital sequence, a 5-minute tracking shot through fire and screams, was chaos turned into precision. Thousands of squibs detonated in perfect rhythm, a symphony of destruction where emotion and violence became indistinguishable. Hollywood watched in awe. Directors like Tarantino and the Wachowskis borrowed Woo's style, but none could replicate his beauty and brutality. When Woo finally moved west, studios tried to tame him and failed. Hard-Boiled proved that violence could be poetry, that style could carry soul. And from its smoke and gunfire emerged a new question. If bullets could dance, could they also bend? 10. Wanted, 2008. Some films bend rules. This one bent bullets. In 2008, Wanted looked like a risky, over-stylized comic adaptation destined to vanish. It had everything Hollywood usually mocked: impossible physics, absurd mythology, and characters who seemed to live by slow motion alone. But that recklessness, guided by director Timur Bekmambetov, became its greatest strength. James McAvoy's transformation from office drone to assassin wasn't about heroism, it was about awakening. His mentor, played with divine menace by Angelina Jolie, taught him to shoot around corners, to let instinct defy logic. It was nonsense. Beautiful, cinematic nonsense. Every gunfight, every car chase, every curved bullet was exaggerated past belief, and yet it all clicked. Bekmambetov shot like a man allergic to restraint. His camera bent space and time, carving out a new kind of action that was part chaos, part comic art. Critics didn't know whether to laugh or applaud. Audiences did both. Wanted proved that not all revolutions need realism. Some are born from audacity. It gave permission to be wild again. And from its curved trajectories, cinema learned that imagination could still hit harder than gravity. But after such excess, the next film would swing in the opposite direction, trading fantasy for raw instinct and color for cold steel. 11. The Bourne Identity, 2002. Before The Bourne Identity, action heroes were clean-cut killers in designer suits. After it, they were shaking, sweating, bleeding, and real. Released in 2002, Doug Liman's spy thriller began as a troubled project: rewrites, reshoots, studio clashes. Matt Damon, best known for drama, wasn't anyone's idea of an action star, but when the film finally hit screens, it redefined the word spy. Jason Bourne wasn't suave. He wasn't even sure who he was. That amnesia became the film's power. Every move he made, every punch, every desperate escape was instinctive. The audience discovered him at the same pace he discovered himself. The fights were close, brutal, intimate, no quips, no posing, just survival. The handheld camera shook not out of confusion, but intensity. It made you feel every jolt, every gasp. Hollywood watched closely and copied quickly. The Bourne style became shorthand for realism. Even James Bond reinvented himself in its shadow. What started as a production nightmare became a genre reset. The Bourne identity stripped action of its armor and made it human again. And just when films found truth in flesh and blood, the next one painted war in myth and pixels. 12,306. It wasn't history. It was legend painted in motion. When Zack Snyder's 300 premiered in 2006, it didn't look like any film before it. Every frame was sculpted light against darkness, flesh against steel, myth against mortality. It wasn't just storytelling, it was spectacle turned to scripture. Gerard Butler's Leonidas didn't speak lines, he proclaimed them. "This is Sparta," wasn't dialogue, it was invocation. The film took Frank Miller's graphic novel and transformed it into a moving canvas, each scene drenched in digital blood and bronze. Snyder shot on green screens, layering visual art over human movement. Critics dismissed it as artificial, but audiences didn't care. 300 was cinematic adrenaline, pure stylized defiance. It proved that emotion didn't need realism to feel real. Its impact was immediate. Suddenly, every director wanted stylization that looked mythic. Comic book adaptations exploded, and 300 became the visual grammar of a new era. It wasn't truth, it was power. And power, rendered beautifully, is the oldest language in cinema. But while 300 glorified myth, the next film would strip everything down again to mud, muscle, and the raw terror of being hunted. 13. Predator, 1987. What began as a joke became one of cinema's purest nightmares. In 1987, Predator was pitched as Rocky fights an alien. No one took it seriously. But in the jungles of Mexico, surrounded by heat, exhaustion, and mosquitoes, director John McTiernan and star Arnold Schwarzenegger created something feral. The premise was straightforward, a team of elite soldiers hunted by an invisible enemy, but its execution was genius. The first half played like a traditional action film, muscles, machine guns, explosions. Then the rules shifted. Suddenly, the hunters were the hunted, and brute strength meant nothing. The creature born from a mid-production redesign after the original suit, and Jean-Claude Van Damme, failed, became an icon. With its heat vision, alien technology, and code of honor, the Predator wasn't a monster. It was evolution, staring humanity in the face. By the end, Schwarzenegger's hero wasn't out-muscling his foe. He was devolving camouflaging in mud, relying on instinct. The film turned action into survival horror, peeling away bravado to reveal fear. Predator redefined the genre by hybridizing it action, sci-fi, and horror colliding into something new. It proved that tension could scream louder than gunfire, and while Predator hunted its audience through dread, the next film would chase them through pure, manic speed. 14. Crank, 2006. Some films build tension. Crank swallowed it whole. Released in 2006, Crank was less a movie than a 2-hour panic attack. Jason Statham's Chev Chelios wakes up poisoned, his heart slowing, his life slipping. The only cure? Constant adrenaline. The only rule? Never stop moving. Directors Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor threw filmmaking convention out the window literally. They filmed on rollerblades, from rooftops, and in the middle of real traffic. Cameras spun, lights flickered, logic disintegrated. Every frame felt one breath away from collapse. The film was absurd, offensive, unstoppable, and that was the point. It mocked the action genre while embodying it, a living, screaming contradiction. Crank didn't want coherence. It wanted velocity. The editing pulsed like a heartbeat, the dialogue was chaos, and the final scene, Statham falling from the sky, smiling as he dies, became its perfect punctuation mark. In a world obsessed with polish, Crank dared to be ugly, loud, and alive. It reminded audiences that madness could be cinematic too. And from that insanity, we descend into silence, where the next film finds not glory, but grief. 15. Rambo, First Blood, 1982. Long before he became a symbol of endless war, John Rambo was just a man trying to come home. When First Blood premiered in 1982, audiences expected another muscle-bound hero story. Instead, they got a tragedy. Sylvester Stallone's Rambo wasn't a warrior, he was a wounded veteran, a man out of place in his own country. The film begins quietly. A small town, a sheriff who wants control, a drifter who wants peace. Then the misunderstanding turns violent, and the hunted soldier becomes the hunter once more. But unlike later sequels, this wasn't about victory. It was about the cost of survival. Rambo kills no one intentionally. The violence is defensive, almost reluctant, and in the end, he breaks not his enemies, but himself. His breakdown in the finale, crying, shaking, confessing his pain, is one of cinema's most human moments. Yet irony rewrote his legacy. The sequels turned him into what he was never meant to be: a weapon, not a warning. First Blood tried to end the myth of the invincible man. Hollywood resurrected it. A film meant to mourn became one that glorified. And in that contradiction, it accidentally created an icon. Bonus fact: Game of Death, 1978. A film haunted by the man who never finished it. Game of Death began in 1972 as Bruce Lee's most personal project, his attempt to explore martial arts as philosophy, not spectacle. The concept was elegant: a fighter ascending a pagoda, facing new styles and ideologies on each floor. The message? Growth through adaptability. Then, Bruce Lee died. Only fragments were shot. 11 minutes of raw genius. 5 years later, producers decided to complete the film anyway. Without him, what followed was equal parts tribute and tragedy. Doubles wearing masks, cardboard faces pasted over imposters, footage stolen from Lee's other films. Even his real funeral was used as a plot device. It was both grotesque and fascinating, a ghost story caught on film. And yet, in the middle of that distortion, something genuine survived. The real Bruce Lee footage, especially his fight with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, is transcendent. The fluidity, the calm precision, the philosophy made physical. For a few minutes, he's alive again, unrepeatable, untouchable. The finished movie is a distortion of his vision, but that's what makes it unforgettable. Game of Death became a warning, a reminder that even legends can be misunderstood, reshaped, commodified. They tried to recreate him. Instead, they proved he could never be replaced. Cinema doesn't always evolve through control. Sometimes it grows through chaos, through accidents, through desperation, through the moments no one planned. Each of these 15 films began as a gamble, a fluke, a misstep, and yet together they built the language of modern action: precision, pain, movement, madness. Maybe that's the real lesson. Greatness isn't always designed, it's discovered. So tell us, which of these accidents do you think changed cinema the most? And how many more revolutions might still be waiting by mistake?